Geth. My question is, what advice do you have for kids that are trying to move to New York City and start their comedy career in regards to like where to live, how to pay rent, how to support yourself, and how to afford anything while trying to pay for UCB classes? Thanks.
All right. Well, Naomi, great question. Thank you for sending it in. The first thing you have to understand if you want to be a comedian is that you're either going to A, live like shit, or B, just be tired all the time. Because your options are try to do it without a day job and hustle, which means you're going to be living check to check and have constant stress about where you're going to find your money. Some people do that, totally valid. Or you're going to have a day job, and on top of it, you're going to try to have comedy at night and get your career going, which means you're going to have a 9 to 5 job, and then you're going to have a rehearsal from 6 to 9, and then you're going to have a show from 11 to midnight, and then you got to get up again for your 9 to 5. So it's hard. It's a commitment, but it's a lot of hustling involved. But I think at the end of the day, like if it's something you want to do, you're compelled to do it, and it's very gratifying to go ahead and do it. I personally recommend the fuck a day job route and just try to make it happen. I got to that point about 6 years in, though, was when I was like, I'm done having a day job. And I also was blessed to have a very cool day job for my first 4 or 5 years doing comedy at Weird New Jersey Magazine. So I've had it actually very easy compared to most. You're probably gonna live with a roommate. It's probably gonna be in some bullshit neighborhood like Sunset Park. No offense to everybody I know who lives in Sunset Park, but more and more comedians I know are living in Sunset Park. It's a weird neighborhood as far as I'm concerned. It's odd. Astoria, a lot of comedians live in Astoria, Queens. That's kind of, there was I think a New York Times article a few years back about how that's becoming like tons of stand-ups live in Astoria. Those are like affordable, safe neighborhoods. I lived in Woodside forever. That's a neighborhood that only me and Connor Ratliff lived in. I never met anybody else who lived there. It's kind of a very nice family neighborhood, but there's not much hip stuff going on. If you want to live with multiple people, then you might be able to bump it up to like Bushwick or Greenpoint or Williamsburg or something like that. That's what I did once I had a little more money. I moved to Greenpoint from Queens. So those are probably some of the neighborhoods you're going to look at. I feel like living in Manhattan is all right. You could probably swing something on like the Upper East Side or up in Harlem, but to me, I feel like it's lame. Like Jersey Dave lives on the Upper East Side. And like I do kind of think like you're spending enough money there that why wouldn't you just live in Brooklyn? Brooklyn's cool. The Upper East Side is not cool and hard to get to. It stinks.
Never been there. You've never been to my place.
I've never been to your place. I hear it has a pretty dope
Awesome.
like patio situation,
Yeah.
but the Upper East Side stinks. It stinks.
It doesn't stink.
It stinks.
I pay less than $1,000.
You pay less than $1,000? Move to the Upper East Side, Naomi. Apparently, that's the answer. Also, we all just know, we all just figured out how much you... But don't you live with your girlfriend and like 6 other people?
I have a huge room. I have every room in my
How
house
many
is
other people
huge.
do you live with besides your girlfriend?
3.
That's weird.
It's the best.
You're going to live like a weirdo. That's the thing, Naomi. You're going to have to live like a weirdo, and you're going to have to be okay with that. Your parents are going to have to be okay with that. Unless you have a source of income, unless you have a trust fund or you have parents that like really love you and support your dreams. My parents really love me and support my dreams, but not to the point where they ever gave me money to pay my rent. I just had to figure it out. So I think the main thing with that, as far as the actual logistics of affording stuff, is you just got to get here and do it, and you'll find a way. And the best advice I ever got was from my shrink, who was like, you need to give yourself no other option except the things you want to do. Because I was at a point where I was teaching tons of UCB classes and doing some acting, but I was getting very stressed out that I wasn't going for it hard enough. And she was like, well, then quit teaching, quit these like magazine writing gigs, not Weird New Jersey, I was doing freelance stuff, quit all these things that aren't satisfying you. And I was like, but that's how I pay my rent. She was like, well, you'll either pay your rent doing what you want or you'll starve. But you'll starve and you'll know you weren't good enough to make it. And that sounds harsh, but you'll know you went for it and you didn't have the chops. So I think you got to get in there and go whole hog at it. Find your safety net, find your people. And at a certain point, you got to kind of put up or shut up and go like, am I a comedian? Then I'm going to make all my money doing comedy. I feel like I'm talented enough. Take years to get talented enough and feel good enough about it. But at a certain point, I think the answer to your question is like, you just got to go for it and see if you got the chops or not. You might have them, you might not, but you'll feel satisfied walking away if you go for it 100% and answer the question. So as far as affording UCB classes, they're getting more expensive every day. Getting more expensive every day. Get in there, kids, while it's cheap. You'll only have to compete with 1,000 other people for one of 7 house team spots a year. Those numbers are only going up. because it's a great theater and because it's very competitive for a reason. I accidentally played the video again. But yeah, you can afford the UCB. You hustle. You get in town, you hustle. You find waitressing jobs, you find temp jobs. You be somebody's assistant. You'll work in some office you hate. Or you'll waitress and bartend and have some weird, bizarre schedule. You'll make it work, though. I don't think there's anybody who's an artist in New York City who had a great job and also made it work besides Phil Jackson, which of course he did. Of course, Phil Jackson had like some badass advertising job until the second he was hired to write for Key and Peele. He's the only person that's ever happened to. Everybody else hustles. But even Phil stressed out a lot. And Phil basically, I lived with Phil. Phil stayed up 24 hours a day, many times a week, so he could make all his videos and do all his shows and work his great job. You're gonna have to bend over backwards to make it happen, but that's everybody's story. And you will someday look back on the toughest times where you struggled the most as the times where you felt like the most joy that you were doing it in the first place. So that's the other thing. I'm rambling now, but you will live like shit, but try not to get too stressed out about that because you will look back on the time that you lived like shit as the time where you were most alive, having the most fun. Well, that's another question that I answered. We're always happy to answer more. If you got questions for me, anybody else from TCGS, there's Shannon the Fish, Bethany, Merv, Hot Dog, Banana Man, Malone, Jersey Dave, Emma, the Beast Masturbator, anybody will answer your questions. So send your videos to zerolabs@gmail.com with the subject line, Ask TCGS. We'll make sure those people get your questions. Please, ask the Beast Masturbator questions. Please. Please ask the Beast Masturbator questions.